Hello everyone, I will be presenting the journal updates for over the past 2 months in radiation oncology. So, these are the journals which I have scanned for the past 2 months to find updates. So, first we will discuss EMBRACE 1. This is an MRI guided adaptive brachytherapy in locally advanced cervical cancer. It is a multi-center prospective cohort study. So, it is a single arm study, but it is quite large and it is one of its kind. It is the first study which had evaluated on a large scale the utility of MRI guided adaptive brachytherapy in locally advanced cervical cancer. The inclusion criteria are more than 18 years, squamous adeno or adenosquamous cervical cancer, FIGO stage 1B to 4A. So, 1B was also included in this, and para-aortic nodal positivity is also an inclusion criteria up to L1 and L2, and patient should be suitable for curative radiotherapy. So, EBRT was delivered using either 3D CRT, IMRT or VMAT. 2D techniques were not allowed, and the dose specified was 45 to 50 gray in 1.8 to 2 gray per fraction depending on the institution protocol. Chemotherapy was concurrent cisplatin 40 mg per meter square weekly. Neoadjuvant chemo and adjuvant chemo were not allowed, and MRI based image guided adaptive brachytherapy was mandated for all patients using JCASTRO recommendations, and the dose prescription for brachytherapy was institution specified. So, there is no specific recommended as per the protocol, but whatever institution feels appropriate and can be delivered using brachytherapy. And if you look at the results, first thing you observe is the excellent local control rates even in stage 4A and 4B patients, which is almost 90%. So, this was unprecedented before introduction of MRI guided brachytherapy in any of the 2D studies and point A based prescriptions. Even the pelvic control percentage is very high, where you see that stage 4-3 had similar pelvic control rates as stage 1B and 2, and DFS was also good, but which is around 50%. Even if you see the stage 3 and 3B 73 and 60%, which is around 10 to 15% higher than what we expect in a traditional treatment. And even overall survival is also good. Total overall survival for the entire population was 74%, which is very encouraging, and this is not a practice changing trial as per. This trial has established that MRI guided adaptive brachytherapy should be the standard in all the future trials, and they have also laid down an protocol based on which we can even practice in clinics and adapt it early. And first I want to briefly describe what is the advantage of MRI guided adaptive brachytherapy, so that we can move. This is a standard brachytherapy prescription where you prescribe to point A regardless of the size of the disease. So, in this scenario, let us say we prescribe to point A, the entire disease is covered with the prescription dose, but this, let us say this is a scenario after EBRT, the patient had some residual, but the traditional teaching says we still prescribe to point A, but there is chance of missing out the tumor, and this part of tumor may receive less dose than the prescribed dose. So, this is a traditional brachytherapy which we have been following for several years now. So, this is the risk of missing. Let us say this is the disease and this area will not receive the dose as per the current standard prescription. So, what we do in MRI guided brachytherapy is this is another new applicator which they have designed as a part of PhD thesis in this one of the authors, and this is a traditional applicator which is a ring and tandem, and additional needles can be placed if required. An additional cap and a parameter needles can be placed to deliver the extra dose to this part of the tumor. This is called the intrauterine channel, this is called the vaginal channel. This two, only intrauterine plus vaginal channel is a standard brachytherapy prescription. So, we are adding along with that additional needles to treat this lateral disease, and this prescription will be based on MRI at the time of brachytherapy post EBRT. So, that is why it is called adaptive brachytherapy. This is not only increasing the dose to the disease which we may miss by the standard prescription, but if there is significant disease regression, let us say after EBRT, and this is only restricted to the cervical lips, then also there is a potential to overtreat with the standard prescription. Let us say disease is only small, around 1 centimeter, there is a potential to overtreat with the standard prescription. So, when we treat with MRI guided adaptive brachytherapy, we only treat to the residual disease and the entire cervix and not beyond the cervix if there is a very good response. So, there is a chance to decrease the dose to the residual disease alone, there is a chance to increase the dose to the disease which may be missed by the standard prescription. So, this kind of dose distribution can be achieved by this MRI guided adaptation. So, this had found that even though we are reducing the dose to the residual disease alone, in case of early stage disease or very good response, the local control rates are still good, and in fact, in stage 1 and 2 patients there is reduction in toxicities when compared to the historical analysis because of the reduction in dose in OARs, because we are adapting based on the MRI. But there is still significant toxicity in the stage 3 and stage 4 patients, considerable around 18%. So, which basically this trial had given the authors their experience to treat using MRI guided adaptive brachytherapy and what to go ahead in the future to make it standardized in the clinical practice. So, they have based on this experience, they have started a large scale EMBRACE 2 trial where they have mandated VMAT or IMRT only conformal techniques to treat with image guidance to treat cervical cancer, and prescription is also mandated so that everyone will practice minimum dose of 85 gray to the target rather than institution specified. And there are some more like prophylactic irradiation of para-aortic was also considered because 2/3 of patients in EMBRACE 1 recurrences were in the para-aortic group, which were not irradiated prophylactically. So, this protocol I am not discussing, but this description, their initial results are very good, and this may become standard in future cervical cancer radiotherapy. So, my next trial is Elliott trial. This is an intraoperative radiation for early breast cancer. So, it is a multi-center, single center randomized controlled trial where 1305 patients aged 48 to 75 years, unicentric, less than 2.5 centimeter disease, clinically node negative and suitable for BCS, were randomized to either Elliott, that is intraoperative radiotherapy with electrons, versus standard whole breast irradiation followed by boost. So, in a Elliott arm, the patient will receive single intraoperative dose of 21 gray immediately after removal of tumor to the tumor bed within the operating room using electrons. There is a dedicated linear accelerators which were used for this, which can be mounted inside the operating room. And the control arm is whole breast irradiation 50 gray in 25 fractions followed by 10 gray boost using external beam radiotherapy within 3 months of surgery. So, their primary endpoint was ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence. So, based on their statistical analysis specified that this is a non-inferiority design. So, they have specified margin of 2.5 times the risk of recurrence in whole breast irradiation. So, they have assumed 3% in whole breast irradiation and considered 7.5% in the Elliott to say it is non-inferior. At first glance, it looks so absurd that this is 2.5 times the higher risk as a non-inferiority limit, but I will discuss more about this. And if you look at the results, this is the 15-year follow-up result. Initial 5-year and 10-year also showed that Elliott arm had higher ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence, and this confirms it that this curves are continuously separating even after 15 years, and at 15 years hazard ratio is 4.6, that is with the intraoperative radiotherapy the risk of recurrence is more than 4 times higher than whole breast irradiation. So, they say that this Elliott should be offered in selected patients with low risk ipsilateral breast tumor recurrence based on their subset analysis, and select the patients where you expect lower risk of recurrence and can be offered. But this, I think this higher chances, 4 times higher, even though there is no difference in the overall survival, 4 times higher risk of recurrence is not acceptable, and all these patients will go to mastectomy ultimately, and it might be difficult to convince a patient also to go with this. So, coming to whether accept this trial design, whether 7.5% is correct or not, first we need to understand that there is no limit to what inferiority, non-inferiority margin we should choose in a randomized trial. It can be as high as feasible as long as it is clinically meaningful. In this patient, they assume that 3% versus 7.5. So, actual difference is 4.5, and if you see that way, this might be meaningful for the advantages we get with this particular treatment, because this is a dose distribution of electron. For example, if you see at 2 centimeter, most of the dose is cut off, and this is the dose distribution of photons which we use for traditional treatment. So, almost at depth of 15-20 centimeter, we still see 20% dose. So, what we do is in Elliott, this is a dedicated linear accelerator. Aluminum plus lead discs are placed immediately after surgery under the pectoralis major muscle, so that when this over the pectoralis major muscle, so that when this breast tissue is irradiated, all the dose will be limited to only the breast tissue and no dose is thrown into the lungs beyond the pectoralis major. So, this is how they design, and this is the applicator where they place intraoperatively and treat only the tumor margins with cut margins with a margin of around 1.5 to 2 centimeters around it. So, advantage of this is, first thing, skin toxicity which they have reported is very low when compared to EBRT, around 13 versus 2%, and lung toxicity will be minimal and negligible, heart toxicity is negligible, and we estimate with the traditional EBRT around 2% of pneumonitis and around 1.5 to 2% of cardiac mortality over the long term. So, which may be probably reduced by Elliott. So, this is their justification in going ahead with such a large margin and going ahead with the trial, but even then they could not achieve, and the recurrence risks were much higher, which are not acceptable clinically. So, this is what we see when we treat using Elliott only the dose to the tumor bed, and whereas with the traditional whole breast irradiation, some part of lung may be irradiated. If it is left breast, heart also may be irradiated. So, that is their justification to go ahead with the study. Next thing is POP-RT. It is a prostate only versus whole pelvic radiation in high risk and very high risk prostate cancer. It is a phase 3 trial from Tata Memorial. 224 patients with a risk of a lymph node spread more than 20% based on Roche formula were included in the study. The patients were of T1 to T3A with Gleason score 8 to 10 and NEPSA, or Gleason 7 with PSA 0.15 nanogram per ml, or Gleason 6 with PSA 0.3 nanogram per ml, or stage 3B to 4A with any Gleason score and NEPSA. So, they were randomized to receive either whole pelvic RT, which includes prostate plus the regional lymph nodes, versus prostate only RT. So, no negative patients were selected in these patients, and whole pelvic RT group received 50 Gray to the pelvic nodes and 68 Gray to the prostate using a simultaneous boost. So, prostate will receive higher dose per fraction when compared to the lymph nodes, and the control arm received only prostate alone RT, where 68 Gray was delivered to the prostate only or the base of seminal vesicles using IMRT, and ADT was given at least 8 weeks before RT and continued concurrently and adjuvant up to 2 years in total. Primary endpoint was biochemical failure free survival, and secondary endpoints were DFS, OS and toxicity, quality of life. So, after a median follow-up of 68 months, there were 36 biochemical failures in the whole population, 7 in whole pelvic RT and 29 in prostate only RT. There was improved biochemical failure free survival and disease free survival in whole pelvic RT compared to prostate only RT, but there was no difference in overall survival. And there was an exploratory endpoint, distant metastasis free survival, which also showed an improvement in whole pelvic RT when compared to prostate alone RT. So, whether to consider biochemical failure free survival and disease free survival as a real endpoint for outcome is a question, and a meta-analysis showed that only distant metastasis free survival is a surrogate for OS, not the other endpoints. So, that is for clinician to decide, but this study had an exploratory endpoint of distant metastasis free survival, which was not pre-specified, and showed improvement with a hazard ratio of 0.35, I think, which is very good as per this. And it is a routine practice even before this study to treat patients with more than 15% of lymph nodal risk to prophylactically irradiate pelvic nodes along with prostate. and the toxicities, GU toxicities were higher in whole pelvic as expected, but GI toxicities were surprisingly not different in both arms. And they concluded prophylactic pelvic irradiation using contemporary dose and radiation techniques along with long term EDT for high risk and very high risk prostate cancer should be routinely considered as a standard for these patients. All the trials before this have used traditional two-dimensional fields to irradiate. So, I had higher toxicities, but this used IMRT. So, the toxicities reported are low. So, next STAR study, this effectiveness of sequential chemoradiation versus concurrent chemoradiation or radiation alone in as adjuvant treatment after hysterectomy in cervical cancer. This is a Chinese study where they have randomized 1048 patients of FIGO 1B1, B2, 2A1 and 2A2 who have undergone radical hysterectomy type 2 or type 3 and pelvic lymph node dissection and had at least one of lymph node positive, parametrial positive, margin positive, LVSA and deep stromal invasion, and it is a 3-arm randomization study to radiotherapy alone versus sequential chemoradiotherapy versus concurrent chemoradiotherapy. One thing to note in the inclusion criteria is this lymph node parametrium and margin positive are traditionally considered higher risk based on the Perez trial, not said Perez trial, and so they are treated with concurrent chemoradiotherapy, but patients with LVSA and deep stromal invasion are considered intermediate risk, where they are considered along with the tumor size as a indication for adjuvant radiotherapy alone. So, chemo was not tested in this population until this study. So, this is a question whether to include this or not, and probably that requires much longer follow up than this. And anyway, patients received adjuvant RT 45 to 50 gray and concurrent chemo RT arm received cisplatin weekly 30 to 40 mg per meter square, and sequential chemo RT arm received cisplatin plus paclitaxel in a 21-day cycle given 2 cycles before and 2 cycles after radiotherapy. So, the sequential chemo RT had a higher and more toxic chemotherapy than concurrent chemo arm, and primary endpoint was DFS at 5 years. Secondary endpoints were distant disease free survival, overall survival and toxicity. And after a median follow up of 56 months, 16.4% patients experienced disease recurrence and disease specific deaths in overall population, and sequential chemoradiotherapy was associated with higher rate of DFS, that is their primary endpoint, when compared to RT and chemoradiotherapy, and hazard ratio when compared to chemoradiotherapy was 0.65, which is very significant, and sequential chemoradiotherapy also decreased cancer death risk compared with RT alone. So, neither DFS or cancer death risk was different among patients with CCRT or RT. So, there is DFS improvement without improvement in overall survival, and toxicities as expected were higher in chemo arm when compared to RT alone, but when compared to chemo RT versus sequential chemo, they were almost similar. They did not specify the hazard ratios and confidence intervals between the comparison between the 2 chemo arms, but overall the numbers look similar. So, sequential chemoradiation may be an optimal adjuvant treatment after radical hysterectomy for heavy stage cervical cancer as per this trial. So, how to adapt this into our clinic requires, I do not think guidelines have not yet adapted this, and maybe a western evidence will make them or encourage them to adapt. And this is a Kaplan-Meier survival curve where DFS showed improvement, but although the curves are well separated, there is no difference in overall survival between both the chemo arms. Next is another Chinese study where this is an initial report of a randomized trial where they have evaluated the role of neoadjuvant chemo versus chemo RT in a squamous cell carcinoma of esophagus. So, they have randomized 264 patients of T3 to T4A, N0, N1, patients with PS up to 2 and less than 10% weight loss and more than 3 centimeters below the upper esophageal sphincter into neoadjuvant chemotherapy or neoadjuvant chemoradiation followed by surgery. So, chemoradiotherapy received 40 gray in 20 fractions with weekly paclitaxel, and neoadjuvant chemo received 2 cycles of paclitaxel alone before surgery. 3 weekly cycles. And surgery was minimal invasive esophagectomy via thoracoscopy and laparoscopy. With the dissection here is, I think, which is much more extensive than what we do or what Western population do, with extensive mediastinal lymph node dissection including a bilateral laryngeal nerve lymph node dissection, paracardiac, lesser curvature, greater curvature, left gastric, common hepatic, splenic, celiac lymph nodes in all patients, and bilateral cervical lymph nodes also in the upper esophagus, which is very extensive. So, their primary endpoint was 3-year overall survival, and secondary endpoints were complications, mortality, PCR rates, RFS, and quality of life. So, a point in statistics here, this study was designed as a superiority trial favoring neoadjuvant chemo-RT. So, when we know that neoadjuvant chemo-RT is already a standard and experimental is NACT, they have taken NACT arm as a control and NACRT as a experimental arm. So, that is a questionable. And second thing is they have chosen, they could have chosen a non-inferiority design to compare NACT with NACRT, or at least a test for difference between both, but they have chosen a one-sided alpha of 5, and the difference expected was 20% improvement in chemo-RT when compared to chemotherapy. So, which I think is much, this was based on a small retrospective study in China. So, which I think is much higher than what we expect in as a difference between chemotherapy and chemo-RT. So, that had led to a smaller sample size of 264. So, these statistics are questionable. So, after median follow up of 56 months, 16% experiences recur, and 1-year overall survival between the groups was 87% versus 82%, which was not significant, but their primary endpoint not reached yet. It is 3-year overall survival, and deaths caused by progression or recurrence were less in neoadjuvant chemoradiotherapy. So, with 6.8 versus 14.4 months, 4%, and R0 resection rates were similar between both arms, and PCR rates were significantly high, around 35 versus 3.8 when compared to chemoradiotherapy and chemotherapy. So, the tumor regression grades as expected is very high in chemoradiotherapy arm when compared to chemotherapy alone arm. And they conclude that this is initial results of this trial show that the chemoradiotherapy followed by minimally invasive esophagectomy has similar safety to and better histopathological outcome than neoadjuvant chemotherapy followed by minimally invasive esophagectomy in locally advanced squamous cell carcinoma of esophagus. So, we need to follow this. Next, I will just give a brief updates of some other smaller studies in respective sites. In lung, we had some studies like, so this is another single institution retrospective study which had compared EGFR and ALK wild patients with immunotherapy versus chemotherapy, and all patients received radiotherapy, whole brain radiotherapy to the brain. So, they show that the use of RT immune checkpoint inhibitors in patients with high PD-L1 expression results in durable intracranial disease control. So, the intracranial response was much higher in immunotherapy patients when compared to chemotherapy. So, this begs question whether we can delay RT in these patients if there is not, if the immunotherapy, whether immunotherapy alone would be sufficient, especially after the QUADS trial showing that whole brain RT compared to dexamethasone had no improvement in outcomes of the whole brain metastasis in non-small cell lung cancer patients. So, can we delay whole brain RT in this patient is the question for the future trials, but there is a meta-analysis, meta-L study which was published I think recently, which showed that patients who are receiving immune checkpoint inhibitors may not require whole brain RT. Phase 1 study with NRG BR001, which evaluated 35 patients with oligometastatic breast, prostate and non-small cell lung cancer with up to 3 to 4 metastasis or 2 metastasis in close proximity, treated with SBRT to all sites. And they found that there was no protocol defined dose limiting toxicities, and 2-year overall survival was I say good, around 57%. So, SBRT for multiple metastasis is safe and feasible. So, there are phase 2-3 trials open now, and we have to watch for it, NRG BR002 and LU002, which are evaluating to look the impact of RT in survival. And this is another study where high dose twice daily radiotherapy improved outcomes in limited stage small cell lung cancer when compared to conventional twice daily standard radiotherapy. So, it is a phase 2 study where 170 patients were randomized to receive 60 gray versus 45 gray, which is the current standard, given twice daily in twice daily radiotherapy. And it had shown that 60 gray population had higher 2-year overall survival, 74 versus 48, which looks big, and we need larger phase 3 trials to confirm this, and which may improve the outcomes in small cell carcinoma further. And in genitourinary, we have a FLAME RCT, which is a phase 3 RCT, which compared standard 77 gray in 35 fractions to the prostate, additional focal micro boost to the prostate alone MRI specified lesion to total dose of 95 gray, given simultaneously along with the in an SIB fashion. We call it simultaneous integrated boost, which has some dosimetric advantages such that we can give higher doses without largely increasing the normal tissue toxicity with this technique. So, they have done this study, it is a phase 3 RCT, and they have evaluated this in patients with intermediate and high risk population prostate cancer, and they found that this concurrent focal lesion ablative micro boost, they call it FLAME, may provide an additional biochemical disease free survival in intermediate and high risk prostate cancer patients with radiotherapy, and there was no difference in overall survival and also no difference in grade 2 and 3 toxicity. So, it is encouraging, but whether biochemical disease free survival should be our primary endpoint is a question for another day. Next, virtual prostatectomy, which they dub using a radiotherapy. Using a ultra high dose single dose radiotherapy, it may be safe and effective in intermediate risk prostate cancer. So, it is a phase 2 PROSINT study where they have given single dose of 24 gray to the localized prostate compared to the standard SBRT of 5 fractions of 9 gray in 30 patients of intermediate risk prostate cancer. It also showed that there was no difference in biochemical recurrence free survival, although the confidence intervals are much wider, and there was no significant difference in cumulative late genitourinary toxicity. So, this is encouraging that toxicities are not different. So, we may need larger studies in similar population to see whether it is feasible or not. So, hypofractionated RT. So, this main reason to study this is for a cost effectiveness and patient's comfort. So, there is another study, hypofractionated RT in locally advanced bladder cancer. So, it had hypofractionated RT had shown better local regional disease control than standard fractionated RT in invasive bladder cancer. So, but the problem is this is not a phase 3 study, this is a meta-analysis of 2 different phase 3 studies which had no direct comparison between hypo and conventional. One study used hypo, one study used conventional, and sometimes both were allowed. So, these are UK BC 2001 Beacon studies whose actual research question was completely different. So, they have analyzed those patients as a IPD analysis, and they have shown that 55 gray in 20 fraction had lower risk of invasive local regional recurrence after adjusting to age, sex, trial intervention, extent of resection, stage, hemoglobin and neoadjuvant chemotherapy than the standard. Unadjusted was showing no difference in any of the outcomes. So, hazard ratio was 0.71 and also had similar toxicity profile. So, since 55 in 20 is favorite in UK, they concluded that this should be the standard of care, but this needs further evaluation. Just want to discuss about this another controversy which was happening after publication of AUA advanced prostate cancer guidelines. So, the guidelines stated that the 16th point is in selected metastatic hormone sensitive patients with low volume metastatic disease, clinicians may offer primary radiotherapy to prostate in combination with ADT. This was based on STAMPEDE study, and but the question was here the recommendation level was given as grade C. Grade C is low certainty, and recommendation strength is net benefit there may be benefit or harm compared to other options. So, they have given a grade C. So, main controversies was risen after this editorial by Zeitman who is a radiation oncologist, and the statements given were the role for high technology, high dose radiation when men are given contemporary optimized systemic therapy remains completely unknown, and radiation oncologists must remain in the wings and play a smaller role when medical oncologists with systemic therapy have asserted themselves as key players. So, this sparked controversy in the community, and there was a letter to editor written by authors Royce et al. So, this is their explanation. I just want to read out. The claim that radiation's role is unknown in the setting of a contemporary optimized systemic therapy places an undue evidentiary burden on the modality. Extending this logic could call into question any previously proven utility of radiation whenever there is an advance in systemic therapy. Notably, none of these trials establishing the benefit of advanced systemic therapy in castration sensitive prostate cancer included radiotherapy to prostate for low volume disease. Yet, panel endorsed these drugs with a strong recommendation and a grade A evidence level. Should not the same evidentiary burden equally apply in those studies also? We are perplexed by the committee's departure from the Lancet interpretation of Stampede Arm H, which is a large scale RCT, that prostate radiotherapy should be a standard treatment option for men with newly diagnosed disease with a low metastatic burden. Although overall population did not show the benefit in overall survival, there was a definite improvement in DFS, but patients with low metastatic burden, which were around 40% of the overall population, had significant benefits. In fact, there is a publication recently of a secondary analysis of this Stampede RCT, which showed that there is a significant difference in overall survival in patients with up to 3 bone metastasis with addition of RT to standard of care, but this was not seen in patients with 4 or more. So, I say that we should consider, but maybe in future studies which are evaluating the advanced systemic therapy should also include RT as a modality in the limited stage disease to actually see what is the benefit. Control in combination with chemotherapy in a prospective cohort study from MSKCC, and they have shown that there was a prolongation of PFS as well as OS in this population, but this is a single arm prospective cohort study and should be evaluated further. And in patients with, this is a very good RCT, which UK RCT 4th trial, it is a phase 3 RCT in 548 patients with follicular and marginal zone lymphoma requiring local radiotherapy or palliative RT. So, standard is to give 24 grain 12 fractions, and they were randomized to receive 24 versus 4 grain 2 fractions. So, that to reduce the radiation dose and its morbidities, since we know that these are indolent and respond very well to radiotherapy, they thought reducing the radiotherapy would give similar outcomes without increasing the morbidity. So, but at 5 years the PFS was significantly lower in 4 grade group, 70% versus 90%, and non-inferiority criteria was not met. It was 3.46 against the 1.37 of hazard ratio. So, 24 grain 12 fractions remains the standard in this population, and SABR is contraindicated in ultracentral tumors. This is already contraindicated, but there was a HILUS phase 2 study which tried to, it is a single arm study which tried to evaluate the feasibility of SABR in the ultracentral tumors which are located within 1 centimeter of the proximal bronchial tree, and they found that your 2-year local control was acceptable around 83%, but grade 3 to 5 toxicities were very high, almost 30% patients, that included 10 treatment related deaths. So, it just confirms the fact that SABR should be contraindicated in ultracentral tumors. That is all. Thank you.